My name is Karina Chung, and I'm here with AJ Titong. Today, we'll be presenting putting your data out there and getting retweets, likes, shares, and comments. You'll learn about how to share your compelling data through social media as a storytelling tool. This webinar is hosted by the Asian and Pacific Islander American Health Forum. We are a national nonprofit that influences policy, mobilizes communities, and strengthens programs and organizations to improve the health of Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders. To learn more about the Health Forum, please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube. Before we begin, a couple housekeeping items. All participants will be muted throughout the webinar. To ask questions or make comments, please use the webinar menu, which contains a questions feature box. Please feel free to ask any questions throughout the webinar. We will be answering all of them at the end of today's presentation. We'll also be posting the webinar on the Health Forum YouTube channel at www.youtube.com/APIAHF. Today's speaker is AJ Titong. To let you know, AJ is a runner. She's an ad junkie, and she's all about social media. And I will now hand it over to AJ.
Thanks, Karina. So I just wanted to say hello to everyone and welcome you back to our webinar series and to the final stretch of this data and communication series. If you followed us along these series and gave us feedback through the evaluations, we want to say thank you, and we value your input and hope to share more with you in the future. So let's get into this. Some learning objectives for today. We hope that you learn how to craft a savvy social media message using your data, and how to find who to follow and share your data findings with on social media, and then get some learning tips on how to plan out disseminating publications with your data. And then for today's agenda, it's very basic, but I do go through a lot of things. And I'll try to slow down. I know last time some of you commented that we went a little fast with this. So I'm going to go over why sharing your data is important. That's kind of the biggest theme for this webinar series. And then steps to sharing your data on social media. Again, I'll go over the why you're sharing specific data, and then who your audience is, what your messaging should be, and then methods to sharing. So here we go. Why share your data? If you follow the Data and Communications webinar series, Karina and I have stressed how data can be used to tell a good story. We want to inform people about our stories because the stories from and about real situations can only help drive change and action. I wanted to get a little cute here. So here's a recap on how data can tell a story. In the last few years, pit bulls have been given a bad reputation. This infographic tells a different story. The message in this infographic is supported by data that 80% of pit bulls seized and killed every year in Prince George's County, Maryland, was because of specific ban on that pit bulls are nice and family dogs. 84% of dogs involved in fatal attacks were neglected or abused. So those are the stats around dogs in general. And the story behind this infographic or this data says, the message really is that the breed isn't the problem, but the owner is. And then I wanted to share this one. Here's a story about young adults. During the Get Covered Under the ACA campaign, or otherwise known as the Affordable Care Act, this infographic from Young Invincibles was shared many times by our partners and work colleagues. The data in this infographic tells a story about two things. One, people are getting covered under ACA, and two, a good chunk of those who are getting covered are actually young adults. So don't underestimate us young adults. And then the next one is, here's some data that we have referenced in the last two webinars. This data shows that 1 in 5 Asian male teenagers considered suicide, and 1 in 6 Laotian, Cambodians, Hmong, and NHPIs don't graduate from high school. So what's the story behind this data? Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander boys and young men do face challenges every day. And that this data also paves a story very different from what the model minority myth is, that Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders do fare well compared to other ethnic groups out there. So quickly with those last three infographics and images, you kind of see how data can kind of share and pave a story for certain issues that are important to us. Why is sharing data important? People who influence our laws are paying attention to what you say. Edelman did a research on how digital media shapes policy. Here's what they found. Digital advocacy is on the rise. From 2009 to 2011, there was a 30-point increase in the use of social media among staffers. 60% of staffers learn about policy issues first online, and 1 out of 3 staffers have changed their position on policy issues based on online information. And if you don't already know, staffers play a big role in influencing how our policymakers should choose or make a decision on certain laws that are happening. And then there are traditional forms of contact remain effective as well. 53% and Twitter is now the mainstream. So 53% of members in 2011 used Twitter. 60% were staffers. It's 2014 now. You can only imagine how much more people are using Twitter as a tool to communicate with people. I think the percentage now is that 90% of policymakers do have an official Twitter account. Twitter is heavily influenced by its capacity as a conduit to news and information, and 98% of Congress are using at least one social media platform. This study was done at the University of Texas. People who influence our laws are paying attention. So House Republicans were the most likely group to use social media, with most 87% on Twitter and then 95% on Facebook accounts. I have a good point to this. Senate Republicans use 83% Twitter and 81% on Facebook. House Democrats use 80% Twitter, and 90% of them use Facebook. Why is this important? If all of these people are on social media and they're using it as a tool to engage with us, they're definitely listening to us. I think social media has been used more has been used more recently compared to traditional forms of communication, which have been like phone banking or email mailers or direct mail. Here's also what people are saying online, what congressmen and women and senators talk about on social media by prevalence. So this is what they talk about most first. One is position taking, like what side they choose, something about what's related to their district or state. Third is official and congressional actions. Fourth is policy statements. And then fifth is what they see in the media. And then sixth and seventh are personal topics and other topics. And then here's another one. More than 50% of people in general learned about a public policy issue for the first time online. So it's not just staffers, but people in general as well. 33% of people in general changed their position on a policy issue based on something you read online. So again, I think it's Web 3.0 now, where everything you learn is basically online. So recap, why share your data? Social media makes it easy to combine text, photos, illustrations, and even videos to tell a story. If you saw earlier, I showed a picture of a pit bull, and you will now remember why it's not the dog, but it's the owners that affect what happens to pit bulls and why pit bulls are not really dangerous dogs. Many people are using social media, and because of this medium, your stories are front and center. Imagine leaving your house without your phone or never being on the computer. That's something you can't imagine these days, because we're always connected, and because we are always connected, we have different stories at our fingertips all the time. Social media makes it easy to consume data in bite-sized pieces. I'm going to go over the length of messages that you should be having in your social media accounts, and it plays a big part in how you share your data, because if you think about data spreadsheets, you think like lots and lots of numbers and crazy characters, but really social media gives you the avenue to share them piece by piece. And then again, social media provides instant feedback, and social media makes it easy to share stories across different platforms. So if you're on Twitter or on Facebook, you can easily grab a link and then share it on another social media account, like on LinkedIn or you could even share it through your email. So in the next section, I'm going to go over tips on disseminating your data through social media. So one of the things that I really look at as the first step to sharing your data is answering the question, why are you sharing your data? Sometimes data can easily be accessible or can easily be collected. But once you have that data, it's important to decide whether that data is useful or not. One of the first steps to sharing your data is asking that question. So just remember, bad data extends well beyond a single mistake. You can which you can misinform the community, create an unclear result, drive people to take the wrong kind of action, and you basically trump your campaign. So deciding whether or not your data is good or bad, there are implications to using bad data that can drive people to do different things. But good data, on the other hand, can help us tell stories. And when we tell our stories, we can improve our everyday lives from lifestyle to education and to health. So the second step to sharing your data, this isn't the part where you're actually sharing. This is like the pre-planning part, but it's to identify who your audience is. When you think about audience, make sure that the data is relevant to them. Is it relevant to, ask yourself if your data is relevant to women. Ask yourself if the data is relevant to men. Ask yourself if the data is relevant to young adults, a geographic community, a specific ethnic group, an idea about education or health or immigration or anything that's happening nowadays. Make sure that you know who this data is directly affecting. And then you also want to make sure that you know who should be the ones reading the data. So here's an example of that. It's important to distinguish who uses social media. If your data is relevant to men, you probably want to use Facebook to share your data because they're on it more. If your data is relevant to women, Pinterest may be a better place for you to share your data. I think Pinterest is kind of a new way of sharing information. I think it's taboo that people think it's only for women, but I've seen a lot of people share fact sheets, issue-based information on Pinterest, especially with infographics and data visualization. Here's another example on what social media sites are used most in regards to specific regions. Facebook is used most in the West. Twitter is used most in the Northwest. Basically, identifying your audience and their choice of communications helps you strategize how you're going to share your data through different mediums and ways in order to make the biggest impact. The next step is to follow your audience. Follow who the data is about. If your data is about health, public health, you want to follow people who are in the public health field. You want to follow communities that you're researching about, and then partners who are doing the same thing. I think what's also important is to follow people or groups who should care about your data. So make sure that you're following those policymakers. And I think folks have asked me before, where can I find a list of these people? So on Twitter, there's actually a list out there, and I suggest you all follow it. I follow it here at the Health Forum, but there's a list on members of Congress, and as you can see, there's over 400 members on there, and then there's over 3,000 people that subscribe to this list. And I can tell you that the people who subscribe to this list are probably other organizations, reporters, media groups, special interest groups that are trying to keep up to date with what's happening in our laws, in our government, and whatnot. And then here's another one. It's called opencongress.org. Just go on there, and then I'll have a list of all the members and policymakers who have Twitter or other social media accounts. So that's a helpful tip. So I'm going to get into the basics of writing a good social media message. The next steps is crafting your message. When you write messages with data, one of the best and easiest ways to make data sound important is to compare and provide context to your data. So here's an example. When conveying the size of the moon, it's not helpful to say the moon has a circumference of 10,921 kilometers. Instead, saying the moon is roughly 1/4 the size of the Earth provides a better context. People don't want to say 10,921 kilometers, and quite frankly, I don't think people can imagine or compare that size, but comparing two things against each other really helps put a picture to it. So here, the moon and the Earth are being compared by size. And then make sure your message has a hook. Interesting data is a result of research and effort. But when you present your data to your audience through social media, get to the point and make sure your data is relevant to them. So what do I mean by this? So I don't know if any of you have seen recent news stories about women breastfeeding publicly, but here's a Twitter message with an infographic attached from the Wall Street Journal that says 82% of mothers said they have breastfed in public, the barriers to breastfeeding, and then it directly links you to the resource itself. What's great about this is there's a lot of, the message is super short, and it's, again, in bite-sized pieces, and you have one big statistic that really tells you a story about women breastfeeding in public. Again, use numbers to capture the spirit of exciting content. Interesting data stories have these big numbers to them. And sometimes the numbers don't look big, but maybe small numbers tell you another story too. For the beloved National Voter Registration Day, we got a lot of these infographics that have numbers in them, and I thought I'd share some stats with you. And they're very basic stats, but when you actually see this plugged into your social media account, you see the image more than you remember what was written in the message. So here it says 46 states will hold state legislative elections in 2014. And then in this one it says 36 states will elect governors this year. So it's just really, the colors, the illustration really help with building a story behind your data. And then here's another one from 18 Million Rising, and it shows that 17% of Asian Americans live in battleground states during the 2012 presidential election. So again, here you see, seeing this image in a Twitter message or in a Facebook message can have more impact in the way you think versus what I'll actually write in the message. If you think about the message that you write, it's basically the caption to your picture. And then another one, comparing Asian American votes versus the general population vote. And then here's another one, Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders and the Affordable Care Act. So here you see 1 in 4 Korean Americans lack health insurance, 1 in 5 Vietnamese Americans lack health insurance, 1 in 3 NHPIs or Native Hawaiians and Pacific Islanders have not seen a doctor in the last year, and 2 million AAs and NHPIs can get covered under the ACA. So what I've done in the past with these infographics is I've taken a snippet of each one and actually used these messages for putting them directly in the social media accounts and then attaching this picture to them. So choose your words wisely and your images wisely. I have a formula for social media messages. In order to write a good message and have it survive shares, retweets, and comments, your message must have 3 components. A short message. Twitter has a limit of 140 characters. I think that this rule should be added to the other social media sites, because when you share too much on your social media sites, people are less likely to care about what your message is about. The second part of my formula is to use images, and I've kind of said this earlier. Going off of the short messages, people jump to pictures before they read. And then lastly, to my the third component to my formula is to use links. Links are so important. If you can back up your messages with your data in it by directing your audience to resourceful links or the actual link to that resource, you build a sense of trust. So sharing short links can also help you track how often someone uses that resource. So here's a little infographic to back up my formula. Photos generate higher engagement on Facebook. there's 53% more likes and 104 more comments if you share a photo. For Twitter, if you use images, the results are 36% increase in clicks, 41% increase in retweets, and 33% increase in visitors to lead conversation rates. And then 31% increase in visits, 48% increase in favorites, and then 55% increase in leads. Again, this really illustrates why it's important to use some kind of image or even linking folks to your information. So here it's the etiquette of retweeting. Leave your room with the @retweet sign, and then give credit to whoever you get your resources from. So if you're getting data that's not yours, always mention who the data is coming from. This way it could bring more traffic to your site and people will trust you more again. And then retain the information as much as possible. So here's more stats on why it's good to have shorter messages. So 0 to 40 characters gets like 16 retweets. 41 to 70 characters get an average of 32 retweets. 71 to 100 characters get you 51 retweets. And then 100 plus characters, 59 retweets. Use only 71 to 100 characters to leave room for a retweet. So every time you're retweeting someone, do realize that a retweet mention will be added to that, and it probably adds another 10 characters to your message. So if you leave room for other folks, they're more likely to retweet it. If they have that error message, then they're likely to dump the message and not even want to retweet it. And then again, use good data to build trust. I can't reiterate that enough. And I think one of the last parts to this is timing is everything. Time your messages. Did you know that people are on social media more during certain times of the day? For example, if you want to see more engagement on social media, you'll have to share at the right time. So I'll go over what times of the days are, what time during a day is really good for sharing posts on Twitter, Facebook, or even LinkedIn and Pinterest. I also think email is a great communications tool to share your data. I'm not going to go over in a lot of detail over emailing folks messages around your data. So if you do find email informative, the best times to do it for email is on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays, in the mid-morning and mid-afternoon. For the rest of this section, I'll help you think about and help encourage you to research when your potential supporters are most likely to receive and give thought to your messages. So over here you'll see there's specific times to use Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. For Facebook, it's suggested that you upload a message between 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. And then for Twitter, it's suggested from Monday to Thursday, 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. And then LinkedIn, it's Tuesdays to Thursdays. So if you think about it, people are more likely to be on their accounts when they're not working. So these are probably break times, or these are probably times where it's not too busy. So Fridays, people probably leave early or go on a weekend mini vacation and whatnot. So here's another one. So to go more in depth, Facebook from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. results in higher click-through rates. And then here it shows that Wednesdays at 3 p.m. are good times, are peak times. And then on Twitter, peak times are Mondays to Thursdays, 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. I think on Twitter you can get away with a lot of messaging just because Twitter is constantly updating. But again, when you're not working or you're busy on the weekends, Twitter doesn't become that great of an option. And then LinkedIn, Tuesdays and Thursdays. And I'm assuming that because LinkedIn is more of a professional site, Mondays and Fridays are the busy days because you're either opening up your week or closing up your week. So the worst times to actually post on your social media would be the weekends before 8 a.m. or after 8 p.m. on Facebook, and then every day after 8 p.m. and Fridays after 3 p.m. on Twitter, and then Mondays and Fridays 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. on LinkedIn. So try to avoid those times. I'm not saying that this is like a holy grail rule, but these are, it's good to know the times that people are mostly online because it helps guide your strategy to when you're going to post. Here's another one. You can see here that break times are the best. So breakfast, lunch, and dinner are most likely the best times to post on social media. And the last part, the big part of this is to share your data with your audiences. So this is with your message. This is with the timing already. This is with you already following the right people. This is you who already have researched who the audience is and then knowing why you're sharing this information. Once you share the information, make sure you engage with the people that you've shared the data with. So here are some five steps to social media engagement. Some of the important things is to listen, which means really read what people are saying online about the data you've shared. Respond to them. If they're asking questions about the data you've shared, make sure that whenever you share data, you have backup information or resources that can really speak to the issues. And then share with folks. Keep sharing a lot of the information, and then you shape your audience, and then you kind of lead them into some kind of thinking. So really sharing data through social media is about making sure you know what your data is used for, making sure you know who the audience is and researching who that audience is, making sure you're following the right people who need to know what that data is, timing your sharing your data so that it gets to the people and it doesn't become a memory, and then making sure you craft the right message. Make sure you include those three components: to link to a picture, have a short message, and to link to resources if possible. So that's pretty much the end of this webinar series. It's very basic. We have a lot of resources online on how to use social media, but this webinar was basically to show the basics of using social media to share data. So let me know if you have questions.
Thank you, AJ, for that wonderful presentation. I'd like to remind our participants that you can ask a question using the questions feature box in your webinar menu. And please go ahead and start typing your questions. We already do have a question. AJ, could you let us know, how do you also properly reference your data and graphics without making it too texty or bulky?
Good question. The reason why links is part of my formula is because the link will directly put you to the resource or the data itself. So you could just use one data source, like 80% of this says this about dogs and their owners, and then the real data will be in the link itself. So I think the link to resources on your social media account really takes away from making it too bulky or too long.
Thank you. And do we have any other questions before we move on? You can also follow up with AJ via email. Her email is atitong@apiahf.org, or you can tweet at AJ. Her Twitter handle is AJTtong. And if there are any more questions, then I'd really like to thank everyone for participating in today's webinar, putting your data out there and getting retweets, likes, shares, and comments. Please fill out the short evaluation survey, which will be sent out this week. And for those who complete the survey, you will receive a list of our favorite social media resources. Today's webinar is the final one in our Data and Communications Webinar Series 2.0, and we want to thank everyone who has joined us in the webinars over the past 3 weeks. All webinar recordings will be uploaded to the Health Forum's YouTube page at www.youtube.com/apiahf. We will also email the recordings to those who have registered for the webinar. And I want to thank you again and wish everyone a wonderful day.
Bye.